Immediately to my right is Roland Schoeman, who was a student at the business school here and started his company with his GW classmate, Mark Wallace, with seed funding from their GW professor, William Money, who we're actually very lucky to have here in the audience with us. Professor Money, if you want to raise your hand there. So it's a testament to how the university can help students and fulfill their ambitions, and this is a fantastic example. Next to Roland is Haroon Mokhtarzada, who started his company as an undergrad at the University of Maryland. And then he continued to work on his company while he was a student at Harvard Law School. He started his company with two of his brothers and has raised a bunch of venture capital money, and he'll be telling his story as well. Next to Haroon is Duke Chung, who shares the same last name as me, but is not related to me, but a good friend. Duke started his company literally out of his dorm room at Cornell while an undergrad with 4 of his classmates, and has since done phenomenally well with the company, moved it down here to DC, and has actually his company is in the Inc. 500 now, one of the fastest growing companies in the US. And at the end is Dave Matheson, who is also a former student at the business school, and who won the business plan competition last year, and is launching his company, Healthy Network, and he'll be able to tell us some of the trials and tribulations of starting a company as a student as well. So what we'll do is I'm going to ask each of the panelists to tell their story for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll jump into some questions. I'll start out with some questions. I'd like to ask people who have questions to come up to the microphone that's in the middle of the room and line up when we get to that part of the program. I've got a couple housekeeping things I wanted to mention. There is another event on December 7th that is being held by SEAS called Entrepreneurship Within a Large Corporate Setting. That's on December 7th. It's not on the program, but please keep that in mind. You can find more information about it on the SEAS website. And we also have a survey that you should have gotten when you were coming in that we'd like you to fill before you leave, and hand it out on your way out. So without further ado, if we could start with Roland.
Sure. Thanks, Jim. As Jim mentioned, my name is Roland Schoeman, and I am an alum from GW. I went through the graduate business school here. And again, to mention Dr. Money, he was a real pivotal player in the evolution of my business thinking and my business idea. It was extremely encouraging of my partner and I, as we were coming up with this idea, was available to talk to us about it. So I am forever indebted to Dr. Money for his support, so I do appreciate that. But when I started out at GW as a business student, I was thinking my business skills were going to be something I would use at whatever workplace I was in. I wasn't really thinking about starting my own company at the time. And I took advantage of the opportunity of being here at GW, where I could meet people in my class that could conceivably work very well with me under very difficult circumstances as these projects went on to the wee hours of the morning. And it was that opportunity, meeting with the students here, that I found my business partner, and he and I hit it off and ended up growing this business. The idea for the business started out as an online file sharing, pre-Napster, the kind of place where you could store your files, share them with other people. We tried to make a business of it, and it didn't do very well. And even as we were starting the business, there were a lot of folks that would tell us, you're wasting your time, there's no need, there's no marketplace desire for that, so go back to your day job, don't hang it up, go back to do what you know how to do best. That was being a management consultant when I was working at Booz Allen at the time. Well, we didn't give up. We retooled our business and moved into the online data backup space. We had a decision to make, though. We needed to raise some venture capital because what we were trying to do required a lot of equipment, and we didn't have enough money to do it ourselves. I had exhausted my savings just getting us to the point where we could get out of our basements and into an office, but we didn't have the real money it took to grow a hardware, software-intensive business. So we needed to try and raise this venture capital, and it was a difficult thing to do. We struck out a lot of times. We talked to VCs, venture capital firms, up and down the East Coast, out west, and Midwest. Everyone kept telling us there's no need for what you're trying to sell. We didn't give up. We kept retooling and refining our business, and ultimately we became a very successful business. The company lasted for about 8 years before we were acquired, and at the time of the acquisition, about 2 years ago, we had 70 employees, hip little office downtown, dogs in the office, exposed ductwork and riding scooters up and down the aisles and that kind of stuff. You could bring your pets in or wear your flip-flops if you wanted to. It was really a fun place to be. And in the end, we had grown this software business in a very stealthy way, acquiring customers as we could by not branding it with our own logo, but finding customers that would put their logos on it, and we would be glad to license it to them. And we ultimately were acquired by Symantec, and that's the company that makes Norton antivirus. If you're familiar with those things, you probably see the annoying pop-ups on your screen all the time telling you it's time to renew. Well, they also offer an online data backup software suite, and that was powered by us. And in the end, our VCs were the ones who, as maligning as I am towards them, because they could be a tough group to work with sometimes, they had great insight as to what the market was doing and where it was going and why it was a good time to get out of our business. And they were the ones who talked to Symantec and said, this is the time to buy swap drives. So they acquired us. It was an ideal exit at an ideal time. The VCs made a lot more money out of it than I did, but it was still a good opportunity for us to grow this business. And in the end, we sold it for about $123 million. And it wouldn't have existed had it not been for the type of environment that you're exposed to here in this school that fosters those kinds of ideas and are supportive of those kinds of things, and has faculty that takes a genuine interest in what you're doing. So I encourage you, as you're hearing these things tonight, as you think about this business plan competition, give it some real thought. You don't have to be a business school student. Just think like a business person of what ideas do I have, and if my friends say they're terrible ideas, it doesn't mean they're terrible ideas. Don't give up, and just keep trying and give the competition a try.
Thank you, Roland.
Sure.
Harun?
That's great. So my story is a little bit different in that I always wanted to run my own business. Since I was a kid, I had like lemonade stands and I did magic shows. And it's just like whatever was in my small capabilities, you know. But I loved DuckTales. Like I just loved like things that had to do with entrepreneurship. So that was, but I never had really huge aspirations of like running some massive business or like, you know, running something like, you know, something where you have thousands of employees or something like that. Just because I never thought I'd be good at sort of managing a lot of people and stuff. I liked working in small teams, and I remembered from school, like if you have a group more than 4 people, you know, 2 of those people do nothing, and then the rest of the people, you know, the other 2 do everything, you know. So it was, you know, I always thought like that's how it would be in a business also. So I didn't have big aspirations. What happened was, fortunately, my brother was a technologist, smart guy. And so we had a lot of people asking us to build websites for them, and this was, you know, when we were at Maryland, and we're just like, that's not a business that can really scale. We're going to build websites for people, but it's nothing that like can make money while I'm not working. And so we said, well, what if we build something that builds websites? And we looked at what was out there, and there was stuff like GeoCities back then and things like that, which some of you might have heard of. And but we just thought they were way too difficult to use. So we said, let's just create something really simple. So we started working on a concept. You know, had no idea what we were doing. Put something up on the web, and you know, a user signed up. And then like one day, 2 users signed up, and then it was 4 users. And you know, just slowly users started trickling in. They started telling us, hey, we like this, but we don't like that, and we would change things around. Our server would crash all the time. And I say server because it was literally like a machine in the closet that we had a DSL connection going into. But that's how it used to be, you know, in 2001. Now it's a lot easier to spin up web applications. So then, you know, I went to law school from 2002 to 2005. My brother's working full time. And that was an interesting time because the business kind of continued to grow, and it was basically paying for its own expenses. So it wasn't costing us anything, but it really wasn't paying us anything either. But what it took more of was just mind share. So, you know, I would go to school and then I'd come home and then I'd get on and like be answering tech support questions or looking at what product improvements we need to do, or, you know, what things we need to fix, or all of that kind of stuff, checking in with the business. And so I couldn't do as much sort of extracurricular activities, but I was doing that. And then by the end of law school, you know, the site was called Free Webs, and so you could build a website for free and upgrade, you know, to premium services. And we also had some ads that generate some money. And you know, by the time I was graduating from law school, we had several million people who had signed up and created websites on this thing. And you know, it was making enough that it actually could begin paying us a salary, which means generating some profit. So I was looking at sort of a career as a lawyer on K Street, or this other opportunity, and the choice was pretty clear, especially because of where the business had gotten, and we thought it had a lot more potential. So I told my brother to quit his job. He was at NIH, he did, and we started working full-time in 2005 in the summer. I did graduate law school, but I did not take the bar. The story there is I was on the way to drop off my bar application. It was a traffic jam. I missed the deadline, and I said, "The hell with it, I'm not going back there." So, so that was that. So I don't ask me for any legal advice. I can't give it to you. So then in 2006, you know, we had started hiring a couple people, and we looked at sort of, okay, what can we do with this business now? Should we just try to flip it, sell it, maybe we get a couple million out of it, or something else? And we had an advisor, and advisors are great when you're an early stage company. And he said, look, it's not, I've seen a lot of companies launch with great products and they never get any users. You know, the fact that you guys have millions of users, this is an incredible asset. You should not just give it away. Why don't you raise money instead? So we decided to do that. We ended up raising a total of $12 million from 2 venture firms and a bunch of angels who became advisors in 2006. And at that point, we actually started scaling the company. So we hired a bunch of people, made a bunch of mistakes along the way, and have recently gotten to an area where we're basically, you know, we're break even, and we've been growing really healthily and things like that. We're now 45 employees. The one thing I would say kind of along the way is, at each stage of the process, first of all, you never really think you're successful, probably until you sell, because there's always someone who's bigger than you or someone who's doing things better than you. The other thing is, I just remember, you know, when I was probably in your situation or something, like I said, I didn't have aspirations for something larger, and I never thought I could. I didn't know what raising money meant. I didn't know how you go about it. I didn't really know anything. And then you talk to people like these guys sitting on the panel, and they seem to know so much, and it seems so out of reach. And all I would say is, it's a really slow, long process that you accumulate all of this information. You know, you don't learn how to run a 50-person company overnight, but you don't hire 50 people overnight. You hire one person today, and then in 3 months you hire another. And like, you know, when you're doing things at that pace, things just start, you know, you just learn along the way. So don't think about this barrier of like, oh, I've got to know like all of these things before I start. I'm more interested in like, just start, and if your idea is working, you're going to figure all of that other stuff out. It's much more important to throw out the idea and see if it's working.
Thank you, Haroon. Duke?
Haroon and I actually, what he didn't say is we've known each other for many years. We actually grew up together, overlapped a little bit in middle school. And so it's actually, I've never heard this story, so it's actually very inspiring to hear the whole web story. And they're a very successful business here locally. So, you know, congratulations, Haroon, on all the success there, and to you as well, Roland. In a very similar story, Parature was created. The original company was called Cyrical. We started this in Ithaca, in the great town of Ithaca, New York, for those of you who've ever been there. One person in the back.
No,
actually, oh, wow. Well, maybe we should move our company back there. Well, we were, in 2000, I was in school there doing my undergrad, and we were all engineers. The inspiration came in a very simple way. You know, our class of about 200 engineers dwindled down to about 100 after the first semester, dwindled down to about 60. And the other 120 kids left to go do startups. So we're this old pizza shops all turned into startups. So College Ave became Startup Row in Ithaca. And you know, in 6 months, we had companies that were acquired by Microsoft, 0 revenue, $30 million. These guys were making a lot of money. And we had opportunities to join all these, but bad timing. Just by the time we were able to sign our employment contracts, they already sold their businesses. So that was a crazy times in 2000. So that was enough inspiration for us to say, hey, let's just try this and see if we can build something. And it happened to be a very good timing and place for us to do this because there was a great amount of talent in the school. We could hire some really good developers. And in the early stage of a software business, that's pretty much what you're doing for the first 2 years is just building a product. Now, none of us are in the customer support business, and that's the business that we're in today. So many people ask me, have you been a customer service agent? Have you done this business before? The answer is no, we've never been in the customer support business. We sort of ended up this, not by what we had planned, but really just by chance. The company itself started as a live chat technology. We created a live chat with the inspiration of helping students connect with each other online. And the goal was to help students get homework help and let other students come online to provide help. And maybe we can make some money by connecting people together. Now, as you probably appreciate, back then, 80 to 90% of the internet was still dial-up. So AOL is riding high on their business. And most of the world didn't have broadband. So internet was still very much very slow at that point. So for us to create a technology, what we were doing was a very similar story to Haroon. We had lined up all of our computers, used the free Ethernet in our dorm, and basically set up our hosting facility there. And because in Ithaca, you don't have a lot of options, number one. And number two, the Ethernet is the fastest thing on campus, and it's free, so we didn't have to pay for it. So we're hosting our software for all of our customers to use in our dorm. And back then, I don't know about today, but back then the dorms don't have air conditioning. So in the summer of 2001, we actually have a lot of issues because when there's a lot of usage on the system, the servers would actually shut down. So those fans that your parents give you that you put on your window, we were putting it next to the servers to keep this thing going. And we were appreciative because we weren't paying for it, and we were technically using a lot of the school's resources to make that happen. But yeah, I guess you got to do what you need to do to start your business, and you appreciate every moment of that. The live chat turned out to be an interesting surprise for us because very quickly in 6 months, what we found out was, the brilliance of one of my co-founders, he said, well, since we spend so much time building this, why don't we put this on the web and let people use it for free? So I said, I suppose that's not a bad idea since we spent a lot of time building it. And it was fascinating. So summer of 2001, we had about 300 companies sign up and use our live chat service. And we could see the usage on our servers. Now, it was for free, so all they had to do was just sign up on our website, and they could launch it on their site. So we were fascinated by why people were using our service, number one. And number two, we were curious to see if they would really pay for it. We found out that all these companies were mainly small businesses coming out of the dot-com era. They had watched the Amazon.coms grow to phenomenal success. And here was the second wave of all the small businesses, the flower shops in your local town. And they all heard the internet's the future, so everybody's trying to get onto the web to build a website to sell things. But the problem was, number one, nobody knew who they were. Number two, their brands weren't recognizable, and hence the conversion rates for people buying stuff back then was very low. And then you had other issues like credit card fraud, which we don't have today, but back then people were worried about buying online. So all these issues created an opportunity for them to use our chat. And what they would do is they would put our chat on their website, and customers who came in who had questions about the products they were selling, they could actually chat with their service agents. And they called it a very humanizing experience. They could actually calculate that if someone chatted with them, their conversion rates of someone buying on their site would go up substantially, 20, 30%. And so this became a very popular technology, and all these companies were using our chat basically to convert sales. I find this all fascinating because back then, and I'd say this is probably 9 years ago, more people would go online to do research, and people still feel comfortable going back to the mall or going back to Best Buy to buy the camera. Whereas 10 years later, today, I actually find myself, I'll go to Best Buy to feel the camera first and go back online to buy a better camera price based on price. So it's funny how things have worked over 10 years, but it's completely upside down again. But the issues back then were different, so we're solving that problem. And we slowly started converting about 20% of our customers into paying customers. But this experience essentially leapfrogged us into the customer support business. And what we found was there was a tremendous opportunity for us to help these emerging businesses provide customer support online. And back then, the only way to get customer service was either pick up the phone and call, which we thought was silly because if you're going to pick up the phone and call for a question, you might as well just buy the product over the phone if you're going to an e-commerce site. And we thought e-commerce was all largely built around a self-service experience, hence Amazon.com or Google or eBay today. You do it on their own. You don't really have to talk to anybody. And we thought customer service should follow that same behavior. If you're going to be comfortable buying something online, then you should be comfortable going online to get your questions answered, whether it's live chat, or eventually what we developed was a lot of self-service technology, so you can go there and try to find your answer, or you can submit a trouble ticket online and let companies solve those tickets as they come in through your website, and that became very popular. And so the company grew. We were fortunate in the early days. I think around customer 20, we landed Blackboard as a customer, which the Blackboard co-founders, some of the Blackboard co-founders had gone to school with us. So we had this real interesting opportunity to help Blackboard with their business, and they were growing like crazy back then. You know, they were, I think, around a $20 million business going to $60 million. And we were essentially providing customer support for Blackboard and their business and to help their universities with questions. And it was then where we were introduced to our first angel investor. His name is Ching Ho. He actually turned out to be the first angel investor behind Blackboard. So when we were looking at fundraising, the Blackboard founders said, you should talk to our angel investor. And he was very impressed that Blackboard was one of our customers. So, you know, had a really good referenceable customer. And he was interested in learning more about what our vision was around customer support and what we could do. And so he became active very on. It was actually him that convinced us not to raise venture capital too early. He became an early investor and helped us as more of a mentor to building the business up in the first 5 years. And the company grew profitably from 01 to 06. And with his leadership and guidance, we built a very good business, 300 customers, and we're having a lot of fun. 30 of us. We moved the company down here mainly because of him and his connections down here. And we were having a lot of fun. You're 25, 26 years old. It's about a $4 million business. And you know, we're making a lot of money just doing that. And in 06, actually something happened. We were offered, someone offered to buy our business. And at the same time, you know, we were being followed by a lot of venture capitalists as well, which we had kindly said no for all those years. But you know, they just kind of kept on coming back each quarter. So we had a decision to make. We said we could either sell the business or we could raise money. And one of our big competitors was about 10 times our size. So whenever we competed, we found that we can beat them. But for every deal we won, they were winning 9. And they had the big brand out there. They were going public, and they were well established. So we had this sort of dilemma. And you're successful, but you always wanted to be them because you know you can win 9 more deals. And are you really winning the market share opportunity out there? So we made a tough decision, and quite honestly, the acquisition offer was very good. And it kind of gave us a little bit of the big head mentality. We went back and said, well, if everyone wants to buy this business, why not just build this up and see what happens? So I should kindly turn them down on the offer and decided to raise money. So from 06 to 08, we raised $30 million to build this business out. And in 08 was a phenomenal raise. Our Series B was Excel Partners, who's actually most famous for backing Facebook. In the Bay Area. They came in and they helped lead our round of $16 million. And right after we actually got their money wired in. So watching $16 million travel from Swiss banks in Europe into our account over a course of a day was very exciting. And then, as I mentioned to Dean Donnelly earlier, that's actually when the work starts again, because after money's in, you know, you got to start building the business. It was fascinating because Q3 of 2008, I remember the Lehman crash, and literally the private equity markets shut down. And for the next 12 months, no one could raise any money. It didn't matter if you were Google. None of these venture firms they all became very risk averse as far as doing new deals. So we were the last deal that Excel did for about 12 months. And it turned out to be actually perfect timing for us because we had a lot of cash and we weren't actually deploying it fast enough to actually use all of it. So hence it became very comfortable for us to have a lot of cash in the business over the last 2 years, which I think, quite honestly, with the way the markets had been a really good savior for our business. But the company continues to grow. We are about 120 people based here locally. The company's raised $30 million. We're roughly a $20 million business. And the ambitions is to try to build this thing to $100 million. And if we could do this here, it would be great. And we would love to take this internationally at some point as well.
Great. Thank you, Duke. Dave?
Don't you love hearing these stories? As a young entrepreneur and someone with an emerging company, I probably have the youngest company here, only founded about 6 months ago. One of the things that's most helpful for me is to listen to the stories of the successes and the failures of entrepreneurs and the bootstrappers that build things from the start. So it's really helpful, and I love listening to these stories. But my name's Dave. My background, again, is very different. When I was very little, I always wanted to be an engineer. I was one of those kids. I always liked to build things. I wanted to build bridges. I used to compete when I was like 6 or 7 years old in Lego competitions, building these little Lego castles. But I didn't become an engineer. I actually went in a different direction, and I became a doctor. So I'm an emergency physician here at GW. I'm actually a pediatrician and an emergency physician, and I teach at the medical school. But I never really lost that desire to want to build something, of your own and my own product and my own company. So my path was I went to college, I went to business school, I went to medical school, I did a residency, I worked for a little while, I did a fellowship. And during my fellowship, I went back to business school where I could learn a little bit more about how to take things in a different direction. And that sort of spawned me on one of the many ideas I had. Was to start a company that provided emergency health education for the patients that I see in the emergency department. So, with the help of some people at GW and some guidance from some of the faculty here, I put together a few business plans, and I actually submitted them to the GW business competition. And our team was the winner of the GW business competition. So that was sort of the spawning of our company. And for the past 6 months, we've been slowly building it and demoing our products and building up our proof of concept, and now we're at the stage where we're trying to raise money and take it to the next level. So I'm one of the younger companies and trying to move to that next stage where we start to get into a phase where we're moving our product into a revenue capturing area. I guess as a health provider and as a company who's trying to improve health outcomes in some way, instead of going through venture capitalists and angel investors, I'm actually trying to use federal dollars to help grow the company. So I'm trying to use NIH grants, and there's definitely money from our federal government, from SBR loans and STTR loans. I can talk more about those things if anyone has questions, where you can get money rather than from friends and family or from business loans or from venture capitalists or angels, but grant money that you don't have to pay back from the federal government to help build a company. And that's sort of where I am now.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Dave, and the rest of the panel for their stories. So I think there's some interesting themes that we just heard from our panelists about what it was like to start a company as a student. One of the themes that Roland brought up that I'd like to explore a little bit more is the idea of where you get support for starting your company. Because as a student, it can be very daunting to the idea of starting a company when you don't really have the previous experience or maybe the gray hairs, et cetera. So I'd like to pose to the panel some more about where did they get the support? Where did they find the angels that would give them the money? How did you convince William Money to believe in you and give you that money to start your company up, et cetera?
Sure, I'll weigh in first. When we approached Dr. Money with the idea of this business, I had already put in what was left of my life savings. And again, go back to the earlier story. I worked at Booz Allen. They paid me more money than I should have been paid at the time, I guess, given what I knew then and what I know now. But I had a good salary, good job. It was very comfortable. And I was willing to give that up. I felt strongly enough in what I was doing that I was willing to give that up, not only leave without having a salary, but also take what nest egg that I had accumulated with my wife and 2 small children at the time and invest that into this venture. It was going to get us partway there, but it wasn't going to get us all the way there. My partner, Mark, he's another Cornell grad, about 8 years younger than I was, so he wasn't out of school for very long, and he had no savings that he could contribute, but had been working many more hours a day than I was to try and get this thing going. But when Mark and I approached Dr. Money about this, he had gotten to know us and got to see what our work ethic was like over the span of the graduate program. And so he had some confidence in us. And I think it really resounded with him when I was willing to put some real skin in the game, give up my salary, put in my savings to give this a shot. My wife was my constant source of support and also asking me and reminding me, are you sure about this? What are you thinking? But she had committed, we'll try this for a year. You know, we have figured things out. We can eat a lot of oatmeal and dry cereal and get by without much, but we'll give it a try for a year and see if it'll fly. I went to Dr. Money, my partner and I both went and talked to him about it. He was very supportive about it. He had given us ideas along the way of what we should do to tweak it and make it a more legitimate business. Because again, you learn only so much in school, and you really do need the input and the support from folks like Dr. Money, who have been around the block enough times to know what doesn't sound good and what, if it sounds too good to be true, that kind of thing. And so he helped us fine tune it, and I think when he got to the point where he felt comfortable that we were serious about it, we were going to have some real skin in the game by putting in our own savings and quit our jobs and do this full time, that was the impetus that he needed to see from us to join the fund.
Anybody else want to address the question of where you get the support, how you were able to convince people to help you out?
I mean, like I mentioned, we didn't convince anyone. We just, we had to just do it on our own. I think we each put in $1,000, which is probably the equivalent of our life savings too at the time. When we raised funding, it was actually a lot easier. We had a little bit of wind behind our backs, probably similar to Duke, because we already had all these users, and we already were generating money from the business, and it had been growing sort of since the beginning. And so that's a lot easier of a story to pitch and to tell, and usually you'll have people calling you at that point than one where you say, hey, I've got this great idea, but I don't have any users using it. And it's just kind of a big question mark of whether it's going to work or whether you can execute it and all of that kind of stuff. So I personally think, if you're going to raise money or try to get a bunch of money in, you should be further along before you do it. Otherwise, it's much more difficult, and you end up giving up a lot more of your company. Mm-hmm. In terms of support, though, I'm a big proponent of angels. I really like the idea of bringing on angels, not just because they have money to give you, but because of the advice and the connections that they can help you with in that early stage, which can be really important, and help you navigate a lot of sort of the pitfalls that you should be avoiding at that stage. And so basically, if you get a couple of good angels involved and a little bit of smart money involved, anything else you need from, what lawyer should I use, to what accountants should I use, to what, which venture firms should I be talking to, all of that stuff, you can kind of get through those advisors and angels.
I'd play on that. I think in our early Perisher story, we had a set of angels, and we strategically did that because locally because they were invested in our business, they ended up helping us get our first set of customers. And they were all local, so they had very good connections with either other companies they're working on. So it became a very good source of not only getting some money to help you build your business, but a source of leads for whether it's customers or references for other things that you might need in order to grow your business. I think playing on Roland's feedback, the strategy of starting a business to be as lean as possible is smart, and I think every entrepreneur just innately thinks that way. Looking back when we started our business, we were 21, 22. And so 23, 24, 25, the only person that we really upset, I think, was my parents, who said, well, we paid all this money to go to school, and you want to stay in Ithaca for another year to get paid nothing? So if you can get by that story, what you do appreciate is, at least what I appreciated when you came out of it, was we were living another year of a college lifestyle. So what, you live on pizza for another year. Most people would raise their hands if they had that opportunity again. But we didn't have families, we didn't have kids, we don't have mortgages. We were as possibly lean as you could get, and we all lived in the same, dorm. So, the cost structure was very low. And I think for smart entrepreneurs, you want to basically start with that baseline. And that alone, competing with your competitor, you already have an advantage because you don't need a lot of money. More of your money can go into your business than to go support your lifestyle. So I think that's smart if you can afford to do that. And that's why, coming back to this, why I appreciate speaking at events like this most is, I think being a student, let me come back and say, the thing I hear most is people later on in their lives always tell me, Duke, I wish I had done what you had done when you did it. And as people become successful, they think about, well, what if I could have started a business and built something up? And I think sometimes it was too late because they had built up their own lifestyle, and it's literally impossible for them to go back to do something at that bare bone level. So I would say the opportunity cost starts now, and if you ever thought about building a business, you should do it now because you're probably at the beginning of your peak of growth over your career, and if you're going to take a gamble, you should do it now before you build up your lifestyle to be too expensive.
So to build on that theme of opportunity cost, I think that as students here starting out, you're just thinking about your career, and there's so many possibilities that you could go. I'm struck that the panel all had a lot of different and exciting possibilities in front of them. You know, Dave is a doctor; he's got a great career doing that. And Duke was graduating from one of the top universities in the country, and et cetera. So, what gave you guys the courage to kind of say, you know, I want to try something. I'm going to try something. I'm going to take a jump into doing something a little bit crazy, and to start my own company, even though I have all these other opportunities ahead of me. Was there a single pivotal moment, or what really kind of pushed you over the brink to be able to take that chance?
For me, it was the thrill of trying to grow something that could perhaps equal what was happening in the news at the time. We had worked on a project for our graduate program where we were basically doing it was a chat kind of software package when chat didn't exist yet. And we felt really excited about that. And then Hotmail was sold for $400 million. We were thinking, that's just email, that's easy. You know, that's near real time, it's not real time. We're doing real time stuff. And they made $400 million? How tough could this be? And so when we started the idea of what we could do to come up with something that would be IPO bound, because that was the big thinking then, is you want an IPO. You can make some money starting a software company, selling a software company, or a business and selling a business, but the real money was the success stories you read on the front page of the New York Times were people that cashed out, selling it big time when they went public. And so that was kind of seeing dollar signs in our eyes, like cartoons you'd see. And so that motivated us. And when we started talking about our business and what we really wanted to do early on, it was how can we scale to get millions and millions of customers. Our VCs were, and this is again at a time where everything was free, nobody's paying for anything, and it was all based on ads. If you can get 1 million eyeballs on your website, you can sell it. And that was sort of the mantra that was drilled into us by one VC after another. They would turn us down and say, we're not going to invest in you, but you get 1 million customers, then come back and talk to us, and we'll talk to you again. And so that was what was driving us. Mm-hmm. And so as we thought about the software that we were designing and here at GW, it wasn't what ultimately we went into business with, but it was kind of laying the groundwork of, gosh, this actually could be attainable, because what we consider to be lesser products are still hitting it through the outfield. We have a shot at doing this ourselves.
Yeah, and Jim, just to answer your question, I think that's sort of the entrepreneurial personality. I mean, that you're not afraid to take on risk, and you're not afraid to fail. And most entrepreneurs will fail several times before becoming successful. Mm-hmm. And I think taking on that risk is very difficult, depending where you are in your stage of life. If you have children, if you have a full-time job, how much risk you're willing to take on at any given point is very difficult. And how you leverage that is, I think, the most important thing in building your company.
I want to give a slightly different perspective, because I think, you know, when people hear that you've got to be willing to risk it all and things like that, it could turn off people who might be the next great entrepreneur. And I do think, you know, I'm a big believer in this whole risk thing also, but I think if you're a risk-averse person, there is a potential other path. And that's kind of the path we took, where, you know, me and my brother, we kind of straddled carefully these two roads. It was like, you know, he had a job and he was working full time, and I was going to law school, and so it sort of created a win-win scenario where if this business we were working on worked out well, then that's great and we can work on that. But if it didn't work out well, we kind of had a backup plan. We didn't drop out of school and go all in. Now you could say to me, or Duke could say to me, yeah, but if you hadn't done that, you know, Webs right now would be twice as big as it is. Right? And you'd be twice as successful, or 3 times, or who knows? And that's probably true. Mm-hmm. If we had quit everything and done it, maybe, you know, I would be so rich I wouldn't even be talking to you people. But
you'd be donating to the school.
Yeah, I'd just be donating to the school. But, you know, but there's another side of that, which is, yeah, but we could have had nothing. And, you know, that's a scary idea. And, you know, we wanted families and things like that eventually. And so we did sort of straddle this line, and, you know, I'm happy with the decision we made that, you know, we had a backup plan. I don't regret going to law school. It was a great education, great people, great connections, all of that stuff. The debt isn't that great, but, you know, everything else was nice. And you know, and we were able to create this business at the same time and get it to a point where it actually wasn't a big risky decision to say, let's go in this, because it could pay us a salary at that point. Not all businesses can do that. Some really require full-time stuff, but something like a web business, you can do it part-time. And you can get by. It's possible to do. And I think it's only become easier with, you know, the sort of the cloud infrastructure that's out there now, so you don't have to manage servers anymore. With all of these sort of third-party things that can take care of different parts, you can outsource this, outsource that, have QA outsourced, have support outsourced. You can do so many things now that you couldn't even 10 years ago. I just throw that out as a potential path. I don't want to say that people shouldn't be, you know, go get them and go all in and everything like that. But if you're nervous about that, I think there is another way.
I tend to believe that, you know, I guess being here in this room alone is a reason why you guys came to this. So I think the first part of inspiration of being an entrepreneur is you're fascinated by that path. So that's usually the first inclination. I think to what Dave said, you know, naturally entrepreneurs are more risk-taking. So, you know, you probably wouldn't be sitting here if you want to go down a more stable path again. So all these characters line up into the initial interest. I think, I wouldn't lie, I would say in the beginning, starting the business, you know, there's a fascination that, hey, going down an entrepreneurial path, you'll make a lot of money. But I think what I have found in the last 8 years is being an entrepreneur, what's actually more rewarding for me personally is waking up and actually building something that will grow. So when you have this feeling of building something, you get a very good sense of accomplishment and achievement. And I think that's really what drives an entrepreneur to continue building the business over time. And that's far superseded the initial intent of, hey, maybe let's go make a few $1 million, and it's more fun doing this. And I think second behind that, not far from that, is you get a really awesome experience working with some really smart people and people you really want to work with. And I think you value that more so when you play this through. And you know, one of the things I've often talked about is at some point, if Perisher does exit, that a lot of our employees may go start their businesses. And I actually hope they would do that here locally. I'd be very proud if that happened. And so when you start to appreciate some of these things more than, you know, making money. And a lot of people will tell you that, you know, like Roland, you know, at some point those things will take care of itself. If you focus on the right things, you'll build a great business. The inspirations of why you do the things you do, there will be a payday and you'll hopefully make some money, and that will be a byproduct of the hard work you've done to grow the business. And of course, the fourth thing is, you know, having the opportunity to come back and speak at events like this, right? So be an inspiration for the next group of people that really want to build a business. So I am, you know, there's a reason why we're all four of us are up here. You know, we're all inspirers of hopefully encouraging you to go take the leap of faith and go start a business and see how far you can build a business yourself. And I think you'll be happily rewarded and satisfied through that process.
So at this point, I'm going to ask just one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. So if you want to start lining up behind the mic, please go ahead. To the panel, looking back at your experiences to date, what do you know now that you knew when you were a student and first starting out your company? And what are some of the lessons you've learned? Just pick one, maybe one lesson learned that you wish you knew when you were a student.
Probably building on something that Duke just said about working with smart people. One of the lessons that I didn't really embrace or didn't get until I was well into the 8-year run of our business was the importance of surrounding yourself with the smartest people you can find. Early on, when we raised outside capital, I always felt my job was on the line. Even though I'm a founder, founders get fired all the time. There's lots of stories of people who start a company, get it going, and then the VCs will come in and say, well, okay, you got it to this level, you can now be an advisor and step aside. And so you always felt you had a target on your back. And one of the ways that manifested itself is a reluctance between yourself and the management team that you've assembled. You're all watching each other's backs and trying to preserve the team that you've built, but at the same time, that's hamstringing your operation because you're not really bringing in the sharpest people that you could possibly find. You want smart people, but not smarter than you. And it took me a while to get over that and say, you know, I certainly don't know everything there is to know about running a business. As was mentioned earlier, you learn new stuff every day. And one of the things that I finally embraced was I needed to stop doing the finances. I'm a pretty good finance guy, but I wasn't a CPA, and I needed to get a CPA in there. And I needed to get someone in that was going to be a better sales guy than the guy that was doing the sales that we were trying to generate. And once we kind of let down our guard a little bit and started really going for the sharpest people we could find, that's when there was that inflection point and the business really took off. It was amazing how that works. And you get bright people doing good things, businesses will grow. And it took us a while to kind of come to that realization. And I didn't get fired in the process, so it was all for naught.
Anyone else want to feel that question? And if we could get people to come up to the mic with their own questions, please.
I guess the one thing we learned along the way that we had suspected was, I guess, two things. One, oftentimes these ventures take longer than you expect. And you don't really mind it if you're having a good time. It's really, you realize not every moment's going to be a great time. So you have to really balance the ups and downs of that experience. And it really is a roller coaster ride. There's going to be great days. There's going to be some really tough days. I think the other thing that's interesting that we found that proved to be true was, sometimes you start with a product and you have an idea, but I would bet that many times businesses evolve. And being an entrepreneur is very much a testament of a problem-solving exercise. So as you figure out and you learn more about your market and your customers, it's possible 10 years down the road your product may be very different. But you don't know that when you start the business. And so it's a very iterative process. And as you build your business and you learn about your competitors and you begin to build your business along a certain path based on the facts you have in front of you. And what we have today, being in the customer service business, again, is not what we decided when we started the business. We were in the e-learning space with a chat product, and we thought the business would be here. We thought maybe Blackboard would be interested in acquiring us. But here we are 10 years down the road, we're building a customer service product for companies because that's really where the market took us down. And we don't regret any of that. It was just the venture and the experience and the path we ended up with. And so I'd go back and say one of the great lessons we learned was your initial idea of what you start with your business may not necessarily be your business 5 years or 10 years down the road. It may evolve and you might find other things that are more interesting. I think before I turn this over, a good example to that is if you guys know Groupon. And Groupon's a phenomenal success today, but that business wandered around the forest for the first 3 years with the technology and the fundraising space. And someone in their advisory board said, well, since this is not going anywhere, you should take this technology and maybe put a shopping element to it and sell deals. So they took the same kernel and made it what it is today, and the company is doing $300 million today in 2 years. So you just never know where your business will go, but good entrepreneurs will never quit, number one, and number two, they're really good problem solvers, so they'll figure out over time where the markets are, and you may just find the right opportunity for yourself.
Maybe we can jump into question. I see somebody standing there, so we can jump into audience questions.
Well, good evening, gentlemen, and thank you for speaking before us today. We really appreciate this. My name is Shannon Knudsen. I'm entering the Pitch George competition. I'm also hoping to enter the business plan competition. And one thing you said that really resonated with me is I feel like I know nothing. This is my first time. So I was wondering if you could share maybe one mistake that you made along the way, that if you could tell somebody like myself now that I could watch out for, that we wouldn't read in a business school book or learn in some of our classes.
So
Well,
many. It's like,
Or maybe two.
At risk of offending the lawyer on the panel, I had no concept of how much money I would be spending on lawyers. And of the first $1 million we raised a total of about $8 million in venture capital. The first $1 million, 300,000 of that got gobbled up in legal fees. And I had just no way of forecasting that's what it was going to be. But when you raise money, not only are you paying for your attorneys to review the documents that get generated, you're also paying the legal bill of the venture capital firm that's lending you the money or investing the money in your business. And those kinds of things happen. If you have any fallout with your business partners or any kind of scraps like that, that legal clock starts running really fast. And so that was something I just had no way of knowing that we would need that kind of money for that kind of purpose.
anyone else?
I made, when we raised funding, one of the things that was told to us is, okay, well, now you have all this money, go and scale and hire people, and hire executives and things like that. And I made several hiring mistakes, and have since cleaned things up. I tried to sort of analyze what was at the core of the mistake, and I think what it ended up being was that I was really enamored by people's resumes. Someone could be like from great schools and really bright and stuff like that, and have all of this experience, but they didn't really have experience in a startup or in something we were doing. They had more experience like at Fortune 500 companies. And I kind of made this assumption that things kind of just translate over. Like obviously, if you can manage a gigantic team at like AOL or some other company, this is going to be like nothing for you. But actually what I found in practice was very different, that because people, because of the way large companies are structured and these tiers and all this stuff, there's a big difference between the managers and the people who actually do the work. And they get so far away from the doing the work part that they don't even know how to do it anymore. And that can really happen if you're, to people in these larger companies and organizations. And so, so that was definitely, and so then I sort of re-looked at things, and a lot of our hiring switched to, going longer on sort of drive and just raw intelligence and things like that, and shorter on resume and what their experience or how many years experience they had and stuff like that, and it ended up working a lot better.
Just in respect to your question, because I think part of your question was geared toward writing a business plan and gearing it toward the competition and developing a product. And I think some of the things that are really important that people forget are, if you're developing a product and you're thinking who your end user is, it's really important to figure out what the value is going to be of that product, and not necessarily the features of your product. If you're doing something faster than somebody else, or your processor goes at a faster rate, and that might not be what the customer wants. You really want to try to see if you can quantify true value. What are you adding to somebody by them buying your product? And I think if you figure that out, it's sometimes easy to work backwards and then look at your market and how to develop your product and how you can integrate that into who your consumer is. I don't know if that kind of answers your question a little.
For us, one of the things I look back and I wish we did better, we found something fascinating in our business. First 300 customers were very small businesses, and not having been in business before, we thought that that was the right target market to go after. It turns out actually the same technology could be used by mid-market and enterprise companies for 5 times as much revenue than what we were charging for the small business marketplace. And so that was sort of an eye-opening experience for us, and we couldn't have gone there until, one would argue we couldn't have been able to go upstream unless we had the first 300 customers. But one of the lessons I, go back and look at if we did Paratrail all over again is size the market opportunity for where you want to go after first and understand the attributes of your customers. Because when you understand that, you may think a little bit differently about your business, and number one, how your cost of acquisition to getting there, and potentially how to price and position the product for that market. I think we were overbuilding and overextending a product for the wrong market. And so we were spending a lot of time, and hence it was very expensive for us. We felt like we always had to go out and push to get more money to build the product, where we were just pointing the gun in the wrong side of the field. If we actually pointed the gun to the right side of the forest, we would be making a lot more money. And it took a little bit of time for us to learn that. And once we started to figure that out, we're a lot smarter about picking the type of customers we really want to go after.
Hi, my name is Matt Sterling. I'd also like to thank the panel here today. I'm actually an entrepreneur for years, and so it's very inspiring for me to hear stories of fellow entrepreneurs. I currently work for the post office, though, so it's kind of the opposite of the entrepreneurs. But anyway, my question is for anyone up there, how many VCs did you have to go to before you finally got that commitment? And when you got that commitment, what was the most kind of motivating thing from the VC to want to invest in your business? Thank you.
Start? Sure. We went and spoke with about 13 or 15 VCs before we found anybody. And in fact, we didn't find the VC that invested in us, they found us. We kept getting turned away. A lot of nice patronizing comments along the lines of, well, this is very interesting. I just don't see it, though, and I don't get it. But hey, you guys look like you're spirited. And you could do something with this. Have fun, but let us know if you need more money further along. Another excuse we would hear is, oh, well, you only want to raise $5 or $10 million. That's a lot of work that we have to go through to give you that kind of money. If you wanted to raise $30 million, we could talk about it. And so that was always a story that they would throw off as a kind of a backhanded compliment, and we would shake our heads and say, well, we didn't want to give away the entire company. We hope to grow this and actually stay a part of it. So we went a different path. We sort of gave up. We were at the end of our rope. We were burning through what money we had put in, what Dr. Money had put in, and it wasn't until we were fortunate enough to do some guerrilla marketing. We had no money for real marketing. So we were contacting magazines and newspapers and offering free accounts and writing up press releases that looked like newspaper articles or magazine articles that they could use as filler about this intriguing new product idea that's out there, and you can get a free trial account, that kind of stuff. In the process of doing that, we caught the editor's eye at Entrepreneur magazine, and they just happened to be, it's one of these planets aligning kind of stories. They were working on a story of top 10 new industries to look at for growth. And they called us up and talked to us a little bit about what we were doing. They wanted to come down and interview us in our office. We didn't have an office. At that point, I had about 6 servers lined up in my kid's playroom. My partner had 2 or 3 servers in his playroom. I guess it was just in his apartment at the time. And so we had a guy that was doing some programming for us that had this really cool, he had cashed out from Microsoft a long time ago, so he had lots of money and was doing it for the fun. But he had this really cool house with what had been a boathouse down along the Potomac that he turned into an office. So that became our office for the Entrepreneur magazine shoot. And we all kind of stood around like, oh yeah, we come here every day. This is where we do our stuff. And so the story ran, and we were one of nine other companies that were out there. And the local venture capital firm saw that article and said, you're local, you're tech, you're in a space that we invest in. Let's get together and talk about this. And that's how we actually found the money. We chased it down, but we never found it until they found us.
Yeah, we probably talked to a similar amount of people, 13 to 15, somewhere around there. And like I said before, we had traffic and stuff like that, so it's a little easier conversation for us. But that doesn't mean everyone said yes. We certainly got turned down a couple times. Well, for us, the big decision was West Coast versus East Coast investors. If you're a web company, Silicon Valley is the place to be, and those are the investors that have, the know-how and everything like that. And we got a lot of interest from some really top-tier firms, including Sequoia and others. But they said, we want you to move the company. And that was another decision point. We grew up in this area, and all of our families here. It's really important for us, and we just, at that time, just didn't want to move the entire company. And we also thought it'd be disruptive for the business itself. Some employees aren't going to move. There's all that stuff to deal with. And so we decided to stay. And as a result of that, we said, look, let's pick local investors because, if someone's just flying into a board meeting every other month or something like that, they're not really going to be able to add much value. And for the local investors also is really appealing. There's not, surprise, surprise, there's not a lot of Web 2.0 companies in this area. And so for them to kind of be in a Web 2.0 company locally without having to fly all over the place was exciting for them as well.
One of the best advice I'd gotten from our chairman, who turned out to be our mentor, close mentor, was, when we were fundraising out of college, we actually found it to be very difficult. And like this experiences that these guys were talking about, we were often turned away. And I asked them, what are we doing wrong specifically in your experience, because you had seen this play out with other companies. And he actually said to me, I remember we were at a Barnes & Noble's grabbing coffee together, and he said, Duke, you're doing this all wrong. He said, what you need to think about is focus on building a business first, and then the VCs will come find you. And I actually thought he was just full of shit, excuse my language, but I was like, everyone else is getting funding, and I don't see why we have to do that much work for people to get attracted. But it turned out to be very much the case. So 5 years into the business, we had gotten contact like Haroon's story by a lot of VCs. And my chairman had always convinced me not to be too eager to take the money. And because the VCs, remember, they're in business by investing into your businesses. So it's very symbiotic. It has to work, for both sides. And so at some point, it's their job to scout out deals, and they will come find you, and it turns out to be very much the case. So in '06, the way that we ended up raising the capital was in '06, Gene Rickers, who is at Valhalla today, was previously at FBR. And we had met him back in '03 and '04. And when I first met him, I was a little nervous because you're meeting a VC, this guy's very experienced, and you're the first-time entrepreneur, so you don't know what kind of questions he's going to ask you. Coming out of the first meeting, I actually was very impressed. I enjoyed the conversation with him. We obviously weren't raising money, but he saw our revenue projections and sales, and he gave us some very good advice, and I thought it was very helpful. So after that experience, I had a different perspective on VCs. I took every meeting possible. I went to every meeting. I went to every venture fair. We tried to present. Every time we got invited, we would present because it's a marketing opportunity for us to get in front of investors. And anytime a VC reached out to want to talk, I would always have a drink or have a coffee with them because I always felt like, it never hurt to share a little bit about our business. You get to know me, I get to know you. And he or she might actually give me some advice for my business on, what we should do. And they were always interested, and they were always making introductions for us, to potential resellers or customers. So we took all that for free. And so that was a very enjoyable experience. So that led to, when we were ready to raise in '06, they came back, Gene came back and said, now I heard you're ready, but he had already seen our track record over the last 3 years, and we were pretty close to what we had always said we would be. And that gave him a lot of credibility, gave us a lot of credibility, but gave him a lot of confidence in investing in our business at that point. Now, I remember in '06 when we raised our money, it was the same concept. We wanted the East Coast, West Coast. So our decision was actually to split the round. If we were going to do this right, we were worried about the same thing. We had heard the East Coast investors are very conservative, and they just wanted to be very financially oriented, whereas the West Coast investors are very aggressive, and they always wanted to shoot for the home runs. So we decided to split the round up. We raised $13.5 million. We split it into two groups. We let Gene take half, and we went to Sand Hill Road, which I had never been, but I had read in the newspaper all the time that this is where you need to go to find money. So I showed up there, and we picked Sierra Ventures as the other VC to invest. So together, they put in $13.5 million. Now, through that experience, I had met about 10 VCs, and one of them was Excel that we talked to. Now, they were too late to get into the round, so it was funny. Actually, Kevin Efrusi, who ended up doing the Facebook deal at the same time they were looking at our deal, he picked to work on Facebook instead of us, and I know why now. I told him, you're the smart VC, you picked the right deal. So he actually said, he called me up at the last moment and said, I don't have time to do this deal. I need a few more weeks. So I said, that's okay. We have a lot of people waiting, so we're just going to close this, but maybe there's a future opportunity. But when we went back in '08 to raise money, Excel surfaced, and I talked to Kevin again, and Kevin asked me, what are your numbers for '08 and your projections for '09 and 2010? So I gave him over the phone what our numbers were, and he said, that's pretty good. I still have your 2006 investor deck, and you're pretty close to what you said you would be in '06. And that translated into him at Excel coming back in '08 to lead the round for us. So, the moral of the story is you just really never know. I think my experience in this is you should talk to as many VCs as you can. It doesn't mean that you're going to take money from them, but I think, if anything, when you're ready to raise money, it warms up that conversation. And it gives you, as an entrepreneur, really the opportunity to learn a little bit more about this person who's going to join your business and help you build your business out. So I think it is very symbiotic, and I think entrepreneurs should put at least the 50% of the efforts in the interview, take that opportunity to interview their potential VC.
If I could weigh in with one more comment as it relates to talking to the VCs. One of the complaints that I hear back now from VCs that I'm now friends with and do business with is how they still get a whole lot of poorly written business plans, which leads to deals not getting approved or getting exercised. And you have frustrated entrepreneurs who aren't necessarily given any real feedback as to why their deal wasn't good. They just get the vanilla, well, it's just not in our space, we don't feel comfortable with this. And they're not telling you, this plan really was not very well written. And one of the things that got us the funding that we ended up getting, they called it out for us and said, your plan was one of the best written plans that we've seen in a long time. And it's almost like the Hollywood directors that get treatments sent to them daily, and they have like an Indiana Jones kind of camera shot that pulls back, and you see shelves full of movie ideas. The VCs are the same way. They get business plans sent to them all the time. And they don't really have time to spend a lot of time with it. And the people who are screening those business plans are looking at them really, really quickly. And if the financials don't look good, if there are grammatical errors, or if it doesn't follow a logical structure of what a business plan should look like, that is going to be a big hindrance in getting venture capital as well. So make sure you don't shortchange yourself in that process and your eagerness just to send business plans out to VCs. You really want to polish that and have friends look at it, have business people look at it, get whatever free advice you can to smooth out the rough edges.
That's a great point, and one of the reasons why we do have the business plan competition here at GW is to give you that experience. We provide a lot of different workshops and things like that, and I'll talk about that some more at the end of the session here today. And I know that the seats you're sitting in are very comfortable, and the microphone is very far away, but if you've got questions, if you can come on up to the mic and ask them of our panelists, that would be great. I see Doug walking up.
Hi, I think I'm a ringer here. That's why I was here, right? Okay. Well, first of all, do you guys have any plan to make your business plans available online? I mean, you guys are all pretty much exited or way down the road, right? If your plan got picked out as being really, really good, and as somebody who's called through thousands of business plans, I understand, maybe you could make that available publicly, a little whiteout for some details for an example for everybody?
Yeah, I'll consider it.
Consider it,
Yeah,
yes.
I'll
I'm sorry.
consider it.
I mean, if you consider it your secret sauce, then don't do it. Let's see, what was I going to say? You guys might want to touch upon dilution, which we note that dilution is a word that's very close to the word dilation, and actually the two are related. So you may want to touch on dilution and talk about different rounds and other sort of things like that. Yeah, he's over here smiling. It's like, yeah, I've done like 4 venture funded deals, which have had multiple stages and stuff, so dilution is not a foreign concept. But actually, in almost no other financial context in the world actually works that way. VC math or investor math is kind of an odd thing. And congratulations on all of you guys. You've done very well.
I have one thing to say about dilution. So if you're raising money, there's the equation is very simple. How much is the company worth, and then how much are they going to put in, and then what percent does that translate into? And so usually the way they ask how much is your company worth is they say, how much do you want to raise? And that's just code for what is the valuation that you expect, because they're always working back to the same percentage. Let's say they want 40% or 50% or 30% or whatever it is. So if you say 10, they're like, okay, so this person thinks he's worth 10, and then we're going to put another 10, we'll own 50%. Or if you say, well, I need 15, then they say, okay, he thinks he's worth about 20. And so things work backwards that way. So that's one thing. But the more important point, and something I didn't appreciate, is the preference. And you guys need to just understand. I wish someone had just grabbed me and shaken me and said, look, pay attention to preferences. What is a preference? Simply put, it says that the money that they put in, when you sell the company, they get that first, off the top, back, and then you split the rest of the money as if that was the amount the company was sold for, based on your share ownership. So they get these preferred shares that let them do that. And then there's usually a stipulation that, well, if you sell for a certain amount, then that whole thing goes away. But that can be as much as 3 times, for example, your initial valuation. So just, if you think about the math, let's say you gave up only 10% of your company. So you raised, $9 million, and they put 1 in, and that became 10, and now they have 10% of the company. So they've got this $1 million preference. And let's say for some reason you ended up selling for $2 million. This is it's a crazy scenario, but let's say you sold for $2 million. So they're going to end up getting the $1 million off the bat, and then their pro rata, which is the 10%. So they'll get 1.1 million. You'll end up with 0.9 million. So all that really means is, you thought that you only gave up 10% of the company, but based on this preference, you actually gave up over 50% of the company. So that's just an example. That's an extreme example to make the math kind of work like that. But you can see if you raise 10 or 15 or $20 million and they've got this preference, and you sell for 50, lopping that $20 million off of the top of that can really hurt your exit. And so you should be really smart about that. And personally, I would recommend people to be more lenient on the actual valuation and more strict about what these preferred share members get in the end.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the audience?
Can I add something to that, Jim? Also?
Sure.
As far as dilution, I think if you're an entrepreneur and you want to build your business big, and the mentality is you want to get big fast, then I think you shouldn't be worried about dilution that much. Generally, a VC is going to want about 20% of your business. So however you do the math, that's going to be an area where they run into as far as ownership. And so if you think about that math, as long as you can take their money and at least double your revenue, then you're in a safe place. I think where you get in trouble mostly, where I see a lot of entrepreneurs get in trouble, is they're too ambitious and they take the money and they underestimate the amount of capital they need in order to do whatever they need to do, maybe double the size of revenue. And the fundamental cardinal rule in being an entrepreneur, if you're a venture-backed company, is never run out of cash. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where the company's going to run out of cash. And not that the VCs don't have money, but they like those moments. And because when you're running out of cash, they will lend you money, but it's not going to be at the valuation. And quite honestly, your negotiation skills really go sideways. So they're going to say, I'll give you the cash, but we want the valuation to be this, and they're going to be able to dictate terms. I think that's where the dilution hit really affects a lot of entrepreneurs. Now, a smart VC will be careful about that, how malicious they want to be, because if they want you to stay around, they're obviously going to be careful. But more often than not, if the entrepreneur is too ambitious, running out of cash, VC comes in, recaps the company at another valuation, and I think you get in trouble. And so you just have to, being risk-taking, you just have to calculate and be very careful about how you, look a little forward as far as an entrepreneur, what you expect, and hopefully never put your company in a situation where you need cash.
Good evening, gentlemen. I also wanted to thank you. This has been enjoyable to hear your stories. My name's John Jamison. I'm a computer science graduate student here. And what I wanted to go into was, it sounds like there's a pattern in some ways that you guys all have a technology-based firm as well as a business partner. And I wanted to go into what your level of skill set was at the time you started your company. If you had the skills with a computer science background, or if maybe your partner did, or if you maybe had some kind of matching skill set that really lets you succeed in the workplace. And I know that there's probably students here from undergraduate as well as different years in school, so maybe you could touch on how you potentially developed those skill sets if you saw an idea, maybe in your first year of school or something like that, to get those additional programming needs or server needs or something like that in order to start your company. Thanks.
Well, I studied political science undergraduate, so I didn't have a computer science background. The business program that I was involved in here at GW was the information systems program that they have that's run out of the Ashburn campus. And so I got a good dose of technology while I was in graduate school. Learned about network security, learned about database engineering and interface design and that sort of thing. But I was not a computer scientist. And I was not going to be the guy that was going to write anything more than our initial interfaces. I was a demon with HTML, but start throwing active server pages at me, and I would quickly come to a halt. Fortunately, my business partner, who was an aerospace engineer, not a computer programmer, but also a very smart guy with technology, was able to pick up and learn a lot of that stuff. Essentially know enough to not get sidetracked or discouraged because he didn't know how to do something. He had friends from school, friends that he could call, and we learned with our very limited dollars to hire some consultants to help us over some of the humps when we were trying to come up with prototypes and that sort of thing. So just because we didn't know all the technology that was going to be ultimately involved, we didn't let that stop us. But I'd like to address the kind of the tangential point that you bring up about having a partner. I'm a complete advocate for having a business partner when you go into a venture that's going to be more than just something you can start quickly and flip and be done with. If there's any prospect that your business is going to take some time to go a distance, I can't count the number of times that I've been able to lean on my partner, he's been able to lean on me, and if it had just been one of us, either one of us would have run out of steam. We really thought we'd grow this thing and flip it in 2 or 3 years, and it turned out it took 8 years. Had I tried to do this on my own, my marriage probably wouldn't have lasted, my business probably wouldn't have lasted, and I wouldn't be sitting up here today. So to the degree that you meet people that you're working with here in school or other places in your jobs, finding that person that you can work with and both carry a heavy load and work with each other, that's going to carry you as far as your specific technical skills if you have each other to rely on.
Yeah, I think if you're going to do something in technology, one of the founders or one of the initial people needs to be someone who understands technology. So for me, it was actually both of my brothers, one older, one younger. And I was just more like the product idea person and said, I think this is how it should work. And I was the one trying to promote the site and things like that. But I think, if you're not a technology person yourself, you should try to team up with one if you're going to build that kind of company. But the other thing I would say is, it's advantageous to do something in some field that you actually care about. You shouldn't just chase an idea because it looks like an interesting idea. You'll be passionate and you'll be more into it if you feel like you have some semblance of I like this field, I enjoy it, I follow other companies in this thing, I know what the customers are like here and stuff like that. And I know that wasn't your experience. And so plenty of people do it other ways. But if you're thinking of sort of just beginning, it's a lot easier, I would say, in that respect.
The quality of your founder team is very important when you're looking for money and when you're trying to sell your product. So if you're looking for people who are going to make up that initial founding team, whether it's one partner or 2 or 3 partners, you don't pick your best friend who has the same vision. You pick people with specific skills, expertise in something that can help execute the plan that you want to do. So whether it's a technology person or a marketing or a product development or whatever it is that makes your product unique, and whatever the unique skills are that you're going to bring to the table to make it strong, those are the people that you need.
For us, it was very easy because we were all in college together and we're all engineers, so we can all build and write code at the minimum. So we knew what the downside was. We just end up doing this 10 years later, just write code. I turned out to be in a little bit more of the business function because somewhere down the road, I think 3 years in, my co-founders actually, who are all very technical, said to me, Duke, we need you to stay very far away from the code, and we'll handle that moving forward. So I didn't have anything to do, really, so I just helped them set up the office and set up the administrative stuff and focus on just some of the business aspects of the business, and I started to get intrigued on that side. So it turned out to be a good team. But I would agree with these guys. I think, number one, you should do something if it's your first venture, something you're passionate about, because that's what's going to keep you going in the tough times. Unless you're really passionate about it, that it doesn't make sense for you to really start a business. And second, I think it's natural that you want to find the skill sets, and that potentially would be your competitive advantage if you can find the right people to join you to do this. It's, number one, more fun, and I think number two, it would give you what you need in order to really build a good business. So.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we're going to be jumping into the business plan competition stuff. So.
Luckily, I'm the last. Hello, my name is Yun Zhang, and I also thank you for sharing your priceless experiences. As I am an undergraduate, I'm experiencing as much as I can, broadening my view. What I want to ask you guys is, what was the most valuable experience that you have gone through that gave you insight or ideas that was the most valuable in your before starting your business? Thank you.
I had an engineering class in high school. It was probably one of the best classes I ever had, because what we had to do, they'd present us with a problem, and we really had to take things fully. So it's like, come up with some consumer thing, and then, we'd have to actually design a product. We had to build it in the shop. We had to actually make it, and then we had to do a presentation on it, and present it and say how we're going to sell it and stuff like that. And it was experiences like that really helped later on in terms of just being able to say, yeah, you should be able to think of things from end to end. thinking of something, then thinking about how to make it, and then thinking about how you're going to tell the story about why this thing matters, ended up becoming really useful down the road.
When I was in high school, they had this fledgling program that hadn't been there before, and it was being rolled out of this public school not far from here. And it was through the Junior Achievement Program, where they try to bring businesses into the schools just to let high school students have some mentors in the business world. And I tried to get some excitement among my friends because I thought, that sounds kind of cool. You know, it meets one night a month or something, and give it a try, see what it's like to do something business-oriented. And none of my friends wanted to do it. They thought, that is so dorky. Why do you want to waste your time doing this? So I thought, I'll give it a try. So finally gathered around 5 or 6 people that wanted to try this, and everyone was kind of clueless like I was. And they said, well, this is going to be a business. You need to have a president or a CEO, and you need to have a finance person. So everyone was assigned roles, and nobody wanted to be the president. And it was kind of like the sticky tree. Nobody wanted to hold that sticky tree. And I ended up holding that sticky tree, and I was the guy that got stuck being the CEO of this little startup. And it was an interesting exercise of coming up with an idea for a product. And I think we came up with some kind of like automotive first aid kits. I mean, we were high school students. We weren't thinking real creatively here, but something that we could cobble together going down to the local supermarket and buying Band-Aids and buying bandages. And you had to actually create a product and then try to sell it. And we were actually able to sell these things. And I thought, who'd have thunk it, right? That you could take $3 worth of stuff and you could sell it for $6 or $7. So that kind of got the bug in me that there's a business potential here that you just need to find the right idea. But I struck out a lot of times. After high school and college, I favored myself as something of a photographer. I had my own darkroom, and I was working as a reporter and then the editor of the college paper and that kind of stuff. And on the side, I'd shoot photographs of people and sell portraits and that kind of stuff. But it was nice spending money. It paid for my photo habit, but I wasn't going to make any real money on it. I wasn't going to be able to support myself on it. So I kind of crossed that off the list. And then when I got out of college, the guy that I ended up teaming with in graduate school, he and I actually tried doing some web consulting work. We'd build databases, build websites, but unlike my esteemed colleagues here, we couldn't make it work. We tried, but people would pay us something, but there were a lot of lean times. And again, it wasn't enough to quit the day job. So I guess the thing I would say is, to echo back one of my opening comments, is that even if your first idea doesn't really work out, if you are keen on starting a business, keep that idea factory going in your brain. And just because your friends say it doesn't make sense or isn't going to work, don't necessarily take that as gospel. There's maybe another life for it, or maybe that's just a lesson you put aside and move on to something else, but just to keep trying.
I was going to say, I think most of us do this every day. I mean, you see market gaps when you're walking down the street every day as something of some type of product that you could develop. And I know what I try to do, whether this is right or wrong. If I see something that I think is interesting, I think of if that was my product, how would I develop it and how would I bring it to market? I was in the airport the other day and someone had one of those, everybody has the luggage where you push along, and I had one of those coffee holder where you could hold a cup of coffee right in the middle of the thing that you push. And it was just this little simple piece of plastic, and it was attached on either side, and a 20-cent product. And I mean, I think it's just a good exercise to say, if that was your product, how would you develop it? How would you estimate the market? Who would you try to sell that to? And what are some potential other things similar to it? And I think we all do that every day. And I think that's the entrepreneurial spirit, and that's what you're trying to cultivate. That there are things that you see that there are potential gaps in the market, and how can you make that into a real product, and how can you find customers for it, and how can you gauge what customers really want, and how can you add value to what a product could be and what the customer really needs, and then how can you turn that into a company? And that's an exercise that I think you can do over and over, like in your mind or on paper, until you find a product that really is yours or has your own expertise behind it that you can actually push to the market and make something real.
For me, it was, I trace back to the initial inspiration being actually in a very similar class in Cornell. I took an MBA class in entrepreneurship. And I didn't go to a lot of classes because, I was always trying to go out and build a business and do some other ideas. But the entrepreneurship club was very fascinating. And one of the things they did was they brought in a lot of speakers. And I remember a conversation from a speech. I think it was the CEO at the time of Lending Tree. And he had come into Ithaca, and he was talking about the Lending Tree business. And I was fascinated. The approach the growth, everything aspect of that business I was just fascinated with. And I remember going home that night, and I think most MBA students, they go to class and they learn case studies. I actually went home and looked at all these successful companies and read up about how they got to where they are and the stories behind it and the tribulations and all that. And I spent quite a bit of time that semester just reading up on all these stories. And I was fascinated, and when you hear it in a video testimonial, it's even more impactful, right? And I think that all led to the inspiration to say, hey, these people are all changing the world in some capacity, and you can make some money doing this too. So, that's pretty fun. And that sparked a lot of the inspiration for me personally. And I still do that a lot. When I hear great growth stories like locally, there's Living Social and these guys all here. And when you meet with these guys and you hear their stories, I still get excited today because everybody's kind of got to where they are through a different path. And I think you'll find every combination for all the most successful companies out there. But it's those stories on why they did what they did, how they came up with the idea, and the success that's brought them to where they are that personally still continues to make me excited about the Paratree story. And I'm equally excited to actually share the story with others as well. And I think you become very passionate about building a great business as a result of that.
Thank you. That last question was actually a very good segue into the business planning competition. I'm going to talk about that for just a couple minutes. This is the kickoff for the 50K business plan competition, which, as you can see from all the logos up on the screen, has very broad participation from the different schools here at GW. In the past, the business plan competition was run mainly out of the business school, but this year we've been able to get broad-based support from engineering school, business school, Columbian College, and the School of Medicine. So this is really a competition for everybody in the school. I just wanted to make that point very clear. The mission of the business plan competition is to foster new venture creation, to really push entrepreneurial culture at the university as something that's part of the everyday life. We want to try to establish GW as a hub of entrepreneurship in the DC area so that when people think about doing a startup company in DC, they think about hiring our students, they think about coming here for technologies, they want to talk to our professors, et cetera. So that's one of the things that the business plan competition is really, we're hoping will be a tool for. In terms of deliverables, what the business plan competition is about is writing an executive summary. If you get to the next round, you write a business plan, and in the final round, you do an investor presentation. So it's just, it's a very simple thing. It's something that's starting today and runs through April, and we've got a lot of different events in between to help you figure out how to do each of these things. Eligibility is that students, faculty, and alumni are all eligible to enter. You have to have at least one student team member on your team to enter the competition. We have a special undergraduate category. If you want to qualify for that category, your team has to be at least 50% undergrad. Now the prizes. As I said, it's $50K in cash prizes. First place is $25,000. We also have some in-kind sponsors who are generously providing some prizes there. The first one there, Entourage Edge. We're getting 4 of these. This is, it's kind of like an Amazon Kindle and an iPad all in one. And you can see this is the Kindle side. This is the iPad side. Very cool product. I've been playing with it for the last month or so, and I think that the winning team will be very happy to get those. We also have a partner, iStrategy Labs, who is providing social media workshop and a custom lab to help with the marketing efforts of the winning company. Second place will be $10K, third place $4K, $1K, and then, as I said, we have a special undergraduate prize of $10,000. But beyond just the money, the business plan competition provides a learning experience that is, I think, even more valuable than the money itself. We're providing workshops that'll teach you how to write executive summaries, how to do market research, et cetera. One of the questions earlier was about team building. We know that that's one of the key aspects of being able to form your company. So we're going to be holding these team building events where we're bringing together the engineers, together with the business school students, together with other students from different disciplines at the school. You actually go through the process of doing the market research, of writing and presenting, and getting feedback from our expert panels of mentors and judges, et cetera. There's a lot of networking opportunities where you're going to be able to meet with your fellow students or other faculty or other alumni who are interested in entrepreneurship, and you get to meet the mentors and judges. And for those of you who've been here before and participated in previous business plan competitions, you know that we've got some world-class mentors and judges involved. And for the winners, maybe Dave can talk about this a little bit later, but there's a lot of media exposure when you win the business plan competition. Newspapers, et cetera, call you, and you heard about how getting a feature in Entrepreneur magazine made a big difference as well for one of the other companies. So why else would you participate besides the accolades of winning the prize? Well, you can make a difference being an entrepreneur. As Dave mentioned, you're really going out there and trying to solve a real-world problem. As you're going about your daily life, you see something that's going on that doesn't quite make sense. You know, why do people do this way? Why can't we do it a different way? Maybe I'll go out there and make a difference. You start a company and you're able to solve that problem. You're also creating something new, and as I think Roland mentioned, it's very satisfying to be able to create something new. You really, as an entrepreneur, creating something out of nothing, which is very exciting. And the business plan competition is here really to make sure that you have no more excuses for not acting on that great business idea that you've been sitting on. I'm sure that a lot of you guys out there have had a great idea. You thought about, oh, well, why do people do it this way? And then maybe a couple of years later, you see that somebody else came up with the idea, went out and sold their company for $100 million, right? So what we're doing is we're providing a safe environment for you to be able to take those ideas, to explore them, and to succeed with them. So that's the goal of the business plan competition. So a few things I want to talk about in terms of calendar and resources. One is that we have a mentorship program with the business plan competition. Even before you enter, in fact, immediately after this, if you are interested in getting a mentor to help you with writing or just even thinking about ideas, just shoot me an email, jimchung@gw.edu, and I will try to find a mentor that is appropriate for your idea and set you up with that. For all entries who actually submit an executive summary, we're also providing mentors for all the companies that submit executive summaries. And that program has been in place previously, and that is primarily with GW alumni and an organization called the Entrepreneurs Organization. That was run very successfully. And John Rollins is actually in the audience right here. John, if you want to raise your hand. John has been the one who's been running the business plan competition at the business school last couple of years and continues to work on it as well. We have a bunch of workshops. The next one is starting next week. So we are jumping right into it, and we've got pretty much one event at least every week until through April. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. The next one is on opportunity identification. Next week, Thursday. You can find out, I'll tell you how to find out the details on this, but it's about how do you identify opportunities when they arise. The next one there is on team building events. Our next one is on November 12th, and we're bringing Jonathan Aberman, who is from Amplifier Ventures. He's a VC, investing primarily in internet startups, and he's going to say a few words about how you build a team. We've got the Pitch George competition, which is a smaller competition that focuses on actual elevator pitches, and it's really done within an elevator, and we bring some VCs to come and you can give your pitch there. That's on November 13th. We have a Government 2.0 Startup Lab, which is a way for us to really take advantage of our strengths here at GW in public policy and being here in the middle of DC. We're bringing in a bunch of startup companies that have been successful in the Government 2.0 space, as well as government agency officials who will come here and talk about the problems that they have that they're hoping that startup companies coming out of GW can solve. We got student clubs, GW Entrepreneurs and the C's Entrepreneurs Club. Again, I'll tell you how to get in contact with them. The deadlines, we are having the first deadline on January 31st, where we have executive summary due. We have the business plan due on February 14th, and the investor presentations in the final will be in April. The way you stay informed is through the website www.gwbizplan.com. If you have any questions specifically about the business plan competition, you can also email bizplan@gwu.edu. We have a number of other websites as well if you are interested in other entrepreneurship activities outside of the business plan competition. There's Pitch George, which has its own website as well, www.pitchgeorge.com. We've got a Facebook page for the Office of Entrepreneurship, which is the office that I run. And we also have a new website that's just been launched today by the Office of Entrepreneurship, which is easy to find at gwu.edu/entrepreneurship. Okay. And that is it for the business plan competition. I want to thank our panel here for really being an inspiration for us, and I hope will inspire you to enter the business plan competition. Thank you. Any last words, Dean Dolly?
No real last words except to say, again, thanks to the panel, and you, Jim, thanks for being an excellent moderator. And for you students and others, alumni out there, get busy. So we're adjourned. If you have questions, anything you were too embarrassed to ask in public, come down to the front, and I'm sure one or more of our 4 panelists will answer the question. So thank you and good night.
Card or anything? I'd love to keep in touch. Yeah.